Hello everyone, this is Kaiser War here, and I definitely have to say that Eureka 7 is one of my favorite anime of all time, and I really enjoy talking about it on my channel. The characters are all varied and great in their own right. The romance between Renton and Eureka definitely feels very natural and earned. The English dub is very, very good. The animation was pretty good even back in 2005 when this anime came out, and that gorgeous soundtrack is still stuck in my head to this very day. As a matter of fact, let you listen to some of it. Oh, right. All in all, Eureka 7 remains a timeless classic. A timeless classic that should have been left alone.
Shut the fuck up, no one cares. Know your fucking place, trash.
Eureka 7 has become quite the franchise over the years. It has games, manga, light novels, sequel anime, and 4 movies under its belt. One that came after the first anime and now a movie trilogy. Now, in my personal opinion, none of the media that came out after the original series comes even close to capturing the charm the OG series had, and it kind of loses a lot of what made the series good in the first place. But I'm only going to focus on one of them today, and that being the first Eureka 7 movie known as Pocketful of Rainbows, or otherwise known in the English version as Good Night, Sleep Tight, Young Lovers. Now, Pocketful of Rainbows, despite being the first Eureka 7 movie, decides to do its own thing and take place in an alternate universe where things are very different, both in tone and execution, though it is very much implied in the movie itself and pretty much confirmed in a second High Evolution movie that Pocketful of Rainbows is one of the many canonical timelines that happen in the series.
Look what you did.
So what I'll be doing today is be talking about the differences between the movie and the OG series, though this won't be a plot rundown of the movie or anything like that. More of like, I noticed this happened differently in the original series and all that kind of noise. Now, I will be the first to admit that this movie is not very good at all, and considering how nearly everything in this movie is different from the main series, it is confusing even to fans of the series to follow, which is why I won't be doing a plot synopsis or everything. It's a little bit too much to even bother with right now, but I will also say this, I will not be covering every single change, as some of them are so extremely minor that they really don't even matter in the long run. So I will only be talking about the changes that seem big enough to give a mention to. So without further ado, let's get on with the video about the changes and differences I noticed in Eureka 7, Pocketful of Rainbows. The year of events where Pocketful of Rainbows takes place is actually far earlier than in the original series. Pocketful of Rainbows takes place in the year 2054, with the quote-unquote main antagonist of the film, known as the Azo, appearing in 2009. The OG series takes place in the year 12,000, while the Scub Coral themselves appeared about 10,000 or so years prior to the beginning of the story. Instead of meeting each other by chance in the original anime, Renton and Eureka were childhood friends, with a larva version of Nirvash who only speaks in Mukyu form. The larva Nirvash only speaks in Mukyu, and that's pretty much all it does in the whole movie, just speak Mukyu. I don't know how they're able to get a toy that transforms into a robot and back into a toy again, but I'm not going to question it because I feel like it's for marketing purposes anyway. They also lived in Warsaw, originally known as Warsaw in the original anime. Now, in the original anime, Renton was born and grew up in Bell Forest, while Warsaw was the place in the original anime where experiments were conducted on girls trying to turn them into humanoid Corallians like Eureka. Now, one of the things about Eureka in this movie that is different from the original anime is that she cannot be in the sun, or she'll burn. Now, when Eureka burns in the sunlight, her skin starts to peel away and reveal like a green kind of like film underneath her face. This is basically like what she went through in the OG series, where when she got closer to the control cluster in the OG anime near the end of the series, she basically started to get green skin and started to gain wings and started to go on to a more full-on Corallian form. And that's essentially what she's doing in this movie, but it only happens when she's exposed to actual real-life sunlight. Artificial light's okay, like light bulbs and stuff like that, but like the sun will actually do damage to her. Eureka also reveals that she is in fact a spy robot that the Azo created to store and gather info on humanity. Now, in the original series, Eureka was a humanoid Corallian that was created to see if Corallians themselves can coexist with humans. In this version, Eureka also has a last name, that being Zeta, where in the original series, she did not have one until she married Renton and then took on Thurston as her last name. Now, one thing I did forget to mention before I even began talking about the differences is that Dominic is actually far older than Renton and Eureka. Now, in the OG series, I think Dominic was about slightly older than Renton. I actually can't remember because they didn't really actually go to their ages too much, and I can't remember how old Dominic was by Renton. I always assumed they were the same age. Oh yeah, Kaiser from the future here. It turns out that Dominic is actually 20 years old at the beginning of Eureka 7. Makes sense due to his position, so I completely forgot that. I always thought for years that he and Renton were the same age. Dominic just acted older, so yeah, he is 20 years old. Man. But in this version, yeah, Renton and Eureka are children, but Dominic is far older. He's an adult now. He's basically their mentor. That's all I can really say. Now, the gang come across a snow moon flower, and Dominic says that every 100 years when Stardust falls, one can make a wish on the flower and have it come true. Now, Eureka wishes to be with Renton, and then the flower shoots a blue light only to die right afterwards. Dominic gives the seeds to Renton and Eureka, and they hold on to them, turning them into necklaces. Now, this isn't really exactly a major difference, because I did mention that Dominic is now older than Renton and Eureka, but this whole flower and wish thing will come to play later in the movie, so I have to kind of say it to kind of give context of what I'm going to talk about later, because if I don't, it will be confusing. The movies are confusing enough as it is, but it'll be confusing if I mention that thing at the beginning of the movie. Now, unlike in the original series where the Gekko State worked against the military, they are actually working as a part of the military in the beginning of the movie rather than rebelling against it. But then they rebel against the military somewhat in the middle half of the movie. They start rebelling against them and start killing members off, in the same thing as the original series, just in a very different context. To be more accurate, they're acting as a mercenary group alongside the military, or in this case, the Liberation Army. I just want to be more clear on that before I continue on with the video, because I have a little bit confusing that they're not only working with them because they're just doing mercenary work, not because they're following their goals or anything like that. Now, in the beginning of the movie, Holland has access to the LFO known as the Devilfish far earlier than he does in the original series. Holland doesn't really gain access to the Devilfish until later in the OG series, and he has it as his main unit in this movie. And in this movie, for some reason, I don't know why, but he has the ability to use his compact drive to sense the souls inside living beings. Now, this whole sensing soul thing only really happens at 2 points in the movie that really matter. The first scene they introduce it, and a later scene near the end of the movie. But yeah, that's just a thing the Devilfish can do now. Apparently the compact drive can allow Holland just to see the souls inside living things. I don't know why. They never really explained why this is a thing, or how this could be a thing, or what reason there is for it. But I think it was just to give a point to the movie, just to have something to do with it. Because it shows in the beginning, it's okay, this is how you find your soul. He used it to go find Corallians and kill some of them. But it's only used for one major thing, and that's for the end of the movie to make a big deal out of it. So yeah, just saying that the Devilfish can do that in the movie. Now, in the original series, there was a bunch of Corallians that essentially attacked a large city, right? And then Anime went down, she killed a lot of the Corallians, and it basically showed that, oh yeah, and then they was trying to, get herself in the spotlight. The military were going to use her as basically a publicity thing, oh yeah, she's the hero, killing all these Corallians. That's the deal, right? But Renton's actually the one in the city to take out the Corallians rather than Anime who did in the original anime. Now, what I find funny, right? What I find really funny is that the type End, right? That's what an anime's Nearvosh is called, type the End. It has claws as one of his main weapons, right? But when Renton goes into slash the Corallian that an anime killed in the OG anime, because they're reusing the same animation, Renton has claws for some reason on the Nearvosh, even though the Nearvosh doesn't have access to any of that, right? So I find that really funny because the movie reuses a lot of scenes from the original anime and out of context, which is jarring. If you really watch the OG series a lot and you just know where these scenes are from, it's really jarring to see, oh yeah, this is going to happen. You think, oh, an anime just came out of nowhere and killed his crawl, but no, it's Renton. He has claws for some reason. Hello, Kaizo from the future once again. I wanted to put more context into this scene because it is kind of weird. So it reveals that Renton actually has the swords that he has on Nearvosh can split into this three-pronged weapon, which is why it takes the appearance of the claws. So it was just a kind of way to change the weapon he uses to make it look like Nearvosh type the End's claws, even though they reused the scene to do so, but they changed it up so it wouldn't be so jarring. So yeah, my reaction was a little bit overblown, but it's still weird to do that just to give an excuse to reuse this scene, but it exists. So that's all I want to say. I don't know why Eureka reuses so much animation. I swear to God, they could easily do that. They reuse so much animation. Everything they've done past OG Eureka 7 is crazy, man. Now we finally get to talk about Dewey Novak, or as he's known as Dewey Sorenstrom. Now, Dewey was the main antagonist of the OG anime of Eureka 7, but Renton and Eureka never directly confronted Dewey. They met him once. Never actually fought Dewey or anything like that. It was Holland that put Dewey out of commission. Now, here's the thing about Dewey in this movie that I feel like they've done him way dirtier than he had any right to be. For one, he's already dead before the movie even begins. Dewey had already been killed, and yes, this does come up later. He has no connection to Holland. Well, familial connection, he does, but he doesn't have any kind of familial connection to Holland at all. So Holland and Dewey are not brothers in this continuity. And now Dewey still did the whole thing with the whole Agiha squad getting the children, getting the war orphans and all that stuff. But the way they word it, they kind of word him as if he did something to the children outside of the whole experiment stuff, right? They kind of heavily imply that he may be and I think I don't want to say it. I really don't want to say it on video because I don't make any money off my videos anyway, but I really don't want to say it. But I think that's really messed up, and that's by far the dirtiest thing. They've already killed the guy. They didn't have to make him a creep either, man. Like I know it's the way they word it in both the Japanese version and the English version that really throw me off. I'm like, why would you guys say that about Dewey? Like, again, there were some weird vibes about him in the original series, but that was all for manipulation purposes. Because he's dead, there's none of that there. There's no barrier to prevent you from thinking of that shit in the now, because in the original series, he's just a manipulator. That's what Dewey was going for. He was crazy. He was absolutely insane. He had everyone in the palm of his hands, and now he's dead and a creep. Poor Dewey, sweet Jesus. Now, I mentioned the Azo before. They're the main antagonists of sorts of the movie. Now, the Azo are literally just the Corallians, right? Because Eureka 7 has reused the animation from the original series with the Corallians are now just called the Azo. So that's pretty much it. They serve essentially the same purpose. The Corallians are going around killing things. They want to communicate with humans, but there's that barrier of communication between them and all that stuff. That's what the Azo are, Corallian. That's pretty much it. But considering that Eureka is a robot, it doesn't really work in this context because the Azo aren't really robots, but when you kill them, they turn into puffs of smoke. So I guess they're robots, but they also burst into blood. The Azo are weird. They're exactly the same as the Corallia. It really doesn't really change too much about their lore and everything. They're essentially doing what they did in the original series as Corallia. So that's also that. Now, as for a somewhat big change from the original series, instead of Eureka being the OG pilot of Nirvash, Renton is now the main pilot of Nirvash because Renton had the larva Nirvash from when he was a child. He knows what Nirvash is saying, just like how Eureka knew what Nirvash was saying back in the original series. But Rent is the main pilot. They don't really do much with the compact drive and the Amita drive in this situation because it's already inside Nirvash and it's applied to already be a part of it. And on top of that, Renton's or Eureka's name does not appear in the compact drive because normally when major events happen, like the 7th Swell per se, Eureka's name does not appear in the compact drive at all because, I mean, the Nirvash has nothing to do with Eureka. It really doesn't, actually. It's literally Renton's robot this time, which I find really funny. I really find it funny because they actually put a lot of importance on Renton in this movie. Eureka's important, but she's way less important than Renton is in this movie because the mystery behind Eureka was one of the big things about the OG series, right? But it's kind of Renton who's taken that place from him. Despite him being a normal human, he's more his whole status, his whole status is higher and more mysterious than Eureka's in this movie, if that makes any sense. Now, in this movie, it introduces something known as the Myth Regeneration Project. But before I can go into that more, I gotta talk about how they use the imagery for the Myth Regeneration Project in the form of the book The Golden Bow that used to appear a lot in the OG anime series of Eureka 7. Now, the OG series of Eureka 7 had great importance around this book, more specifically with the Novak family, because Dewey's whole motivation revolved kind of around that book, right? He wanted to be the sacrificial king. And it was a lot of stuff that was going on, but the point is, that this book was very important. I really don't want to go to the Golden Bow because that's a long discussion and it has nothing to do with this movie. But they used the imagery of the book with this myth regeneration project, which I find funny because the myth of this movie has nothing to do with the myth of the Golden Bow at all. So there's that, but they use it because reuse animation. But anyway, according to the Myth Regeneration Project, Renton and Eureka are now chosen figures in this tale, this myth. And they are given the name Peter and Wendy, and they are meant to pilot a white sacred one to bring everyone to Neverland or Paradise. Now, in the OG series, it was stated that Eureka had chosen Renton, right? Eureka was an important character, and everybody pretty much banked their hopes on Eureka. And Eureka chose Renton to be her partner for someone to love. And Eureka could have chose anyone to be this partner, but now Renton and Eureka are destined by fate for this whole thing, right? And considering how important Renton is compared to who he was in the original series, this is very, very important. Now, Holland had been called out by Toho for trying to be the chosen one for this whole thing. He wanted to be the chosen one in the OG series, but was unable to after Renton. You know, that's kind of why he didn't like Renton all that much, because he kind of just wormed his way into it. Like, oh, this kid's the chosen one, that kind of thing, that kind of stuff. But I just wanted to bring up the fact that this Myth Regeneration project does have a big hold over the movie. And on top of that, I just find it funny they used the Golden Bow for the imagery, even though the Golden Bow has nothing to do with it in this movie. I don't know why I find that funny, but I really find that funny. This will also be super short, but there was a weapon in the Eureka 7 series known as Oratorio Number 8. It was essentially a giant cannon, right? But it's called the Hammer of God in this movie. There's a line that comes into play of why it's called the Hammer of God, but the weapons essentially serve the same purpose. So trying to destroy the control cluster is a big weapon. They're essentially it's the same thing, you know? It's powered by the sun, it shoots a huge blast, it's the same weapon. So, yay, the Hammer of God. Honestly, I like Oratorio Number 8 more, but the Hammer of God does sound more imposing. So this next difference is really weird, and I get why they probably went for it, but this one is actually kind of just why, you know? So, does anyone remember Dr. Bear? Does anyone remember Dr. Bear from the OG series? Right. So, Dr. Bear, he's dead, right? He's dead in this movie. Big shocker. But his name in this continuity is actually Holland Novak. It turns out that the Holland Novak that we know, the Holland that, you know, is the commander of the Gekko, right? The one we know. It turns out the Holland we know murdered Dewey Serenstrom. And then he killed Dr. Bear, aka Holland Novak, in this movie. And then took the name from Holland to give it to himself as his own identity. Now, I honestly believe that this is one of the most unnecessary changes ever. One, Holland isn't even connected to Dewey anymore. So the whole Novak thing is kind of just pointless at this point, right? Honestly, he could have just been Holland Novak from the start because Dewey's last name was Serenstrom. They had no connection. The whole thing between Holland and Dewey was the whole family relation thing, right? But the Novak family thing doesn't even exist in this continuity. So there's no point. And plus, this thing doesn't really change anything in the grand scheme of things, so what's the point? So out of all the wild things in this movie, this is by far, this next topic is probably one of the craziest plot twists in the entire movie. So it turns out the entire crew of the Gekko state were once war orphans that were experimented on and survived the tragedy of Doha. And the Gekko further drops the bomb that they are all actually 17 years old. Now obviously in the first anime they are all adults, but in this movie they are known as the Children of Neverland or the Eternal Children, as they all take Datu Ra, which is a growth inhibitor that could essentially give one immortality. Now, this is one of the crazier plot points of the movie, but this goes even further with the stuff that comes after it. So, Toho, Holland, and the rest of the Gekko crew, as orphans, encounter Dominic and Anime. Keep in mind that Dominic and Anime are far older than everyone in the cast, well, the main cast, really. So, they're far older than everyone else. And the children pass through a large purple tunnel where their bodies are broken down. Now, in the OG series, Norb and Sakuya, who don't appear at all in this movie, Norb and Sakuya went through this whole same deal, but this time Holland and Toho take the place of Norb and Sakuya in this scene, and when they pass through, Holland mentions that they saw a world, the Earth, where the moon carved with Renton and Eureka's names, alongside a green trapper ring that surrounds the planet, appears at the end of the first series, and that they believe this place is Neverland, where they belong. Now, this brings up a lot of things. Now that I mentioned that this whole movie is essentially a canonical timeline that take place seemingly after the events of Eureka 7, because Holland and the crew saw that moon with Renton and Eureka's names carved onto it with the heart, and that happened at the end of the series. So this definitely implies that this may happen after the end of Eureka 7. Now, instead of being kids, Holland and Talho and the whole crew of Gekko now age at 3 times the speed, which is why they look like adults, and they're now on borrowed time. Their main goal is to recreate the tragedy of Doha, aka the Agiha myth, so they can go to Neverland before they all die. So they can live forever, because Neverland is essentially a place where time stands still. The original tragedy of Doha had ended in failure, but this time the Gekko will use the true form of the myth regeneration project, aka E7 or Eureka 7. And to do that, they need Renton and Eureka to recreate the myth using Nirvaj. But if the Hammer of God is launched, which will destroy pretty much everything, it will all end in failure. So that's the major, big, huge plot twist of the movie. And I just think that's really hilarious that they went to the idea of like, okay, that's why the Gekko is so old in this movie. They're actually children who just age at 3 times the speed. And I don't know what people at Bones are thinking. The director, Kyoto was on some real shit when he made this. But yeah, that's the whole plot point of the movie. That's the major big thing in the movie, and that's what the Gekko really are fighting for. Now, in this movie, it turns out that Renton's parents were behind the tragedy of Doha. The main reason that Renton is so important is that because he was seen as a good pilot due to resonating with Nirvaj as he grew up with it. Now, it implies that there are more larvae versions of KLFs out there, but there's only been 2 of them we've seen in the entire movie, that being Nirvaj Type 0 and Type the End, which we'll see later. Also, I didn't think I need to mention this part specifically, but I thought it would be funny. So, in the OG series, Renton fights these groups of a bunch of KLFs, and he kind of goes a little bit crazy. He gets what they call runner's high, right? And he kind of freaks out. He kills the people that he was fighting against. There was a lot of stress that was going on with Renton, a lot of bad shit was going on. So it kind of just broke him for a second, and he gets runner's high. Now, the funny thing is that they reused the runner's high scene in this movie, but they use it as a flashback where Renton is fighting back these people, right? The same people he killed, but they cut out all the blood. They changed the blood to like green, and like it's basically Renton doing a combat drill. So basically, it's funny to me because they changed the scene to fit this context. And there was a moment in the scene where Renton makes this face. He makes this kind of crazy face. They used that. Renton losing his shit face earlier in the movie when Renton meets Eureka and she falls out the sky and he freaks out, which forces Nirvaj to move, and then he goes out and catches her. So again, the fact they reuse animation so much but in completely different context is so distracting, really. Like, they're making a movie. I don't know why they couldn't make a whole new animation. And I feel like with every Eureka 7 project, it just gets more and more evident that they just don't have them. They either do this for artistic purposes or they just don't have the money. And I feel like they don't have the money. There's no way that they still reuse animation to this very day. If you guys see what the next Eureka 7 movies look like, you could definitely tell that at least the first High Evolution movie didn't have the budget. So now we can get on to Diane Thurston. Now, Diane Thurston was Renton's sister, but her role in the movie is way different than it is in the actual series. Now, Diane in this series is now a scientist named A. Yamashita. She has no relation to the Thurston family at all. And this is going to be kind of tough to explain, but hear me out. So Diane explains, I put massive air quotes on Diane. Diane explains that the Azo can control and manipulate elementary particles, where they can essentially remake the world by attuning it to people's dreams. And this is brought through the Agiha myth, which act as instructions. However, they cannot do this because they need someone to quote unquote flip the switch to trigger it. And that trigger is Eureka herself. And speaking of the Azo more, it is revealed that the Azo implanted a crystal inside of Eureka that has a password that will allow her to fuse with the Azo. And when she does, an extra dimensional door will open inside of it, and that Renton himself is the key to opening it. This is what the Gekko want. They want Renton to have Eureka. They want Renton to be the key so that when Eureka fuses with the Azo, they could hop through this interdimensional door and reach Neverland. That's the whole point. That's why they want Renton to be with Eureka. That's the whole thing. So yeah, poor Diane though. Poor Diane. But yeah, that's the whole thing. That's what the Gekko want. They want to basically just jump through this portal and reach Neverland. That's pretty much that. Hap and Stoner are now much more crueler. And they call out Holland thinking that Eureka is the chosen girl, aka Wendy. So basically, they learned that the Ageha myth says that the chosen girl is meant to have wings. And Stoner goes like, wait a minute, Eureka doesn't have wings. And like, yeah, she doesn't have wings at all. That's right. So they decide to go confirm for themselves. They go after Eureka. They freaking beat her. Hap beats her down with his gun. They rip off the back of her shirt just to see that, yeah, she does not have any wings. So, Hap's like, okay, well, Holland just kind of screwed us over. So like, what the hell? So Renton, seeing this, is definitely not happy about it. He runs out, he beats the shit out of Hap, and since Hap still has the gun, he raises up to Renton's gut and shoots him in it. And on top of that, Renton's on the ground bleeding. Holland comes down and wonders, hey, what happened? What the hell happened? And Hap's like, dude, I didn't mean to. I swear to God, I didn't mean to kill him. And then out of nowhere, Nirvash's board just slams into Hap and Stoner and crushes them to death. They literally get crushed to death and they die. And it's by far one of the most messed up scenes in the movie. Because not only they turn Hap and Stoner to actual idiots, because like, oh, she doesn't have wings, she's not part of the myth. They straight up die. And I think that's messed up. Like, they did Hap and Stoner so dirty, dude. Like, this is probably the last most prominent thing they ever do, and they get done so dirty. But I can kind of see another angle from it, considering that, yeah, they are just 17 years old, and they do have the mentality of essentially dumb children. Even though they're grown and they look like the characters we know from Gekko's thing, these aren't the original characters. They're missing years and years of intelligence, and they're just doing what they can with what they have. So I guess I could find someone to make an argument that Hap and Stoner were just jumping the gun because they're just impulsive teenagers and don't really have a big idea with the grand scheme of things, but still, it was a mess up scene. Now, I also forgot to mention that Coda from the Council of Sages, she also has a much larger role in this movie than she did in the original series. Now, her whole adventure across the world trying to connect the pieces of the plot, it's more like this movie's B plot. Eureka and the gang have the A plot, and she has the B plot, and other small things make up the C plot, all that kind of stuff. So she's probably one of the more important characters of this movie because she's going around the world trying to connect all the pieces together and figure out how all this myth stuff comes together. This expansion also connects to Brea, another member of the Council of Sages, because since Dewey is dead, there is no one to lead the Ageha squad but him. They don't really call it the Ageha squad in the movie from what I can remember, but he's the one leading the squad now. And since this version of the Ageha, this version of the Ageha squad doesn't have the kids from the Tragedy of Doha in this version, because the Tragedy of Doha doesn't exist in the OG FX7, but the kids that made up the Ageha squad don't exist because the kids that would make up this squad were technically the Gekko. And you already know how that went down, so there's that. And also, he was also the one to launch off the Hammer of God. Now, in the show, Dewey was given a button for the Oratorio number 8, and he launched off the Oratorio number 8 and would, shoot the big blast from the weapon, right? But this time, Brea would be the one who launched off the Hammer of God, since he's not, Dewey's not alive to be in control of that whole situation, which I find really funny, Like, it's funny to give the Council of Sages a little bit more prominence, even though Kuzumi doesn't do anything either. He kind of just, I don't know what the point of Kuzumi is, because Coda and Brea always seem to be the more important ones because they actually do something, which is I find funny. Well, they do something in this movie. They don't really do much in the original show. Coda's probably the one you see the most in the show, but she's a lot more important in the movie. Brea's slightly more important in the movie, and Kuzumi just kind of pieces out after a while. Now we can go back to Aninime. Now, Aninime, for some reason, lives in the Vodarak Shrine. Don't ask me how, because the Vodarak really have nothing at all to do in the movie. at all. They're just there by name, which is kind of sad because, we could have seen how they would have done Norb and Sakuya in this movie, but Tahoe and Holland already took the place of their main scene when they were younger and they passed through the portal, so I guess it doesn't matter. But funny enough, when I forgot to mention Anime being revealed far earlier in the movie, and she was, but now she's much older because she was an adult with Dominic, far earlier in the series. So, and she's also called number 6. So she's 6, and then Eureka's number 7. That's the name of them. They're designated names by the Azo, which I just, yeah. But Eureka jumps out of the ship. So Renton is still in bed. He's still got a big hole in his gut, and Eureka snatches Gidget's gun and holds an Anime at gunpoint. And then there's this giant Azo that shoots out, right? There's this giant Azo that just comes out of nowhere, tries to attack everyone. And then an Anime steps forward. She stops time. She ages down when she stops time. And then she has a talk to Eureka. And she reveals to Eureka that she and Eureka are imaginary beings created by the Azo in the response to human dreams. And that Dominic halted the experiments conducted on the Azo because he didn't want an Anime to die. Now, I forgot to mention earlier that Dominic, right after that he told Renton and Eureka about the whole flower business, he left them alone because he had to go do some experiments. And a week after that, he died. So there was that. And she also mentions that the Azo are a reflection of what is in front of it, which is why the word Azo is the Japanese word for image. They are essentially reflections of what we are as humans, that kind of thing. We're more accurately a reflection of our dreams. Meanwhile, all this is happening and Renton is still in bed. Dominic's spirit comes out to give Renton a pep talk. Now, Renton realizes that Dominic's final words, because Dominic didn't really tell Renton his final words because he said, I have to go. And then he leaves Renton with some parting words, but he doesn't actually say the words out loud. But Renton recognizes the words and he yells out the famous quote of the series, "Don't beg for things, do it yourself or you won't get anything." That was the line that Renton Thurston basically made famous all throughout Eureka 7. A lot of people use that line. Don't beg for things, do it yourself or you won't get anything. That kind of things. But in this series, Dominic does because Adrock doesn't exist, apparently. So Renton breaks out of his hospital restraints. He forcibly evolves Nirvash, and he saves Eureka from being killed by that giant Azo, though he is still bleeding out from the wound. The evolved Nirvash is confirmed to be the white sacred one that was written in the Ageha myth. And cool, he even has a lance now. He has a weapon. Yay! But anyway, this is a twist. This is the form that Nirvash took because Eureka and Renton rejected the myth. So basically, they're rejecting the myth that the Gekko want them to do, and they're going to create their own myth from what an anime says. They're going to do their own thing, right? And let's just say that the Gekko was pissed the hell off for not having the Ageha myth come true, because the Nirvash evolving and becoming the white sacred one in the book of the Ageha myth was their final shot. And without Nirvash, they can't pull it off. It's over. So the Gekko are pissed off, particularly Holland. Holland is not a happy camper. Moving back to that giant looming Hammer of God in the sky, the Hammer of God begins its activation, and the dying Renton and Eureka fly off in the Nirvash to get away from all this, while the enraged Holland chases after them in the Devilfish, leading to the final battle of the movie. This whole event that Holland confronts Renton and Eureka is very short, actually, despite it leading to like a cool final battle, and they're trading some blows back and forth. It's very short, but I'm gonna get to that just a little bit later. So it is also revealed that Tahoe is pregnant with Holland's child. And Holland, after forcing the compact drive to its maximum power, again, when he uses the Devilfish's compact drive, he can see the souls of everything around him. So he sees the souls of everything around him, including the one of his unborn child, which he had no idea of. He never knew Tahoe was pregnant at all. And the thing about it is that Tahoe and Holland's baby is normal. It isn't affected by the accelerated growth rate that Holland and Tahoe possess due to being the survivors of the tragedy of Doha. And this whole thing eventually stops Holland from fighting along with the Gekko. So they essentially say, you know what? This child's our future. We don't need to try to take our future back and everything like that. So we're going to stop right here. We're going to try to live in this world with this child being our future. Now, Eureka takes Renton's necklace of the snow moon flower and puts her around her neck along with her own, and Renton is now just dying further because he's bleeding out. So Eureka wishes to return back to Warsaw to be with Renton. That's all she really wants. And the Nirvash essentially does what Renton did in the final episode to save Eureka by breaking into the Corallian core. He's actually, when Eureka became one with the giant control cluster and became one with the Corallian, they essentially had, Renton had to evolve the Nirvash and go save her, that kind of thing. But this time, they're going to fire the Hammer of God at the core, right? And Renton comes in and, Nirvash, because Nirvash kind of carries this whole thing. I gotta say that Renton and Eureka's piloting skills aren't used for diddly in this movie. That's the sad thing about it is, like, Nirvash is doing most of the work. And again, Nirvash did some things in the original series, but it felt like Renton and Eureka were actually piloting the damn robot, right? But this time, Nirvash is doing all the work. So basically it's just doing what it does, and that kind of sucks. But you could say it's like responding to like the dreams and wishes of Eureka and Renton, moving on its own, but we all know that Nirvash is doing its own work. It's doing everything. It's doing its business. It's the only Renton and Eureka's piloting skills do not matter. But before we actually get to the end of the movie, the impact from the whole destruction of the Corallian core through the Hammer of God, this causes a large impact that causes the world to flood over and stars to fall to the earth. So for the stars to fall to the earth, and Dominic did mention that when your wish is made and the stars fall to the earth, which will come true, all that stuff thing. So an anime eventually tells Koda about the new myth that's supposed to be created. An anime finally passes on and she becomes one with Donovan inside a giant larva, the end, which is by far one of the most jarring scenes I've ever seen in my life. And this whole movie is weird, but this scene kind of just weirds me out. But anyway, so it turns out that the book of the Ageha myth itself that everyone wanted to get a hold of is now blank. This book is now blank. And Koda, being the person who made it this far, she's going to be the one to write the myth of everything that had happened there. So she's going to be the one to essentially write the story of Renton and Eureka as the new myth. The final scenes of the movie end with Renton, Eureka, and now a giant larva Nirvash in a destroyed Warsaw. This is Renton and Eureka's Neverland. Renton is now healed. He doesn't have a giant gun wound in his stomach anymore. Eureka has longer hair, but she cannot speak for some reason, and Nirvash dies, bursting into trapar, or stardust in this case. Renton and Eureka remain together as the movie comes to a close with double rainbow showing overhead. That is the end of Eureka 7. Pocketful of Rainbows. That's Pocketful of Rainbows. That's all the differences that I felt like that really made the movie different from the original series. There was a lot of smaller things, again, as I mentioned before. The smaller things really don't matter in the grand scheme of things, but these are all the big changes that I wanted to talk about in relation to the original series. And that marks the end of my Eureka 7 Pocketful of Rainbow video. And I really like talking about this movie because it's an interesting deep dive of how weird this movie is compared to the OG series. I know a lot of people don't like the movie, and even though I don't like the movie either, it pulls me back in. I have no idea why, but I just keep rewatching this movie, and it was nice to see the difference between the original series and this movie. It was kind of fun pointing out all the things that I noticed that they changed up in the movie just for this alternate universe. So without further ado, I'll see you all next time. Thanks for watching the video, and I'll definitely see you all again when I make another Eureka 7 video in case you want to see those again. So peace everyone. Kaiser War, gone.